afternoon and welcome to Across the Fence. I'm Jolie Whitney. The Northeast Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program, SARE for short, is funded by the National Institute of Food and Agriculture at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The Northeast SARE program is managed by UVM Extension and led by a volunteer administrative council of 22 people engaged with the region's farm and food system. SARE provides grants and education to farmers, educators, service providers, and researchers. This funding addresses issues affecting the sustainability of agriculture. The Northeast SARE program serves 6 New England states, as well as Delaware, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Washington, D.C. Joining me to talk about Northeast SARE is newly appointed director of the program, Dr. Teresa Leslie. Welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And before you started working with SARE, which started in about February, you were working with Morgan State in Maryland. What encouraged you to leave the Mid-Atlantic and come up to Vermont?
I think the opportunity to move from working in a local food system and trying to improve a local food system to moving more on a regional level and trying to improve regional food systems.
So this is on a much larger scale?
It's on a much larger scale, so it takes a period of adjustment. I've only been here since February. It's still February, but so far it's been very exciting to meet new people, and I'm really looking forward in the spring as the farming season comes, kind of opens up, meeting farmers across the region.
Absolutely, and you come well recommended. In a press release from UVM announcing your hiring, the outgoing director, Vern Grubinger, who's been leading the program since 2007, wrote this: Dr. Leslie brings a fresh perspective to our program that will enrich our work. She has a deep understanding of the connection between agriculture and public health, as well as issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. And Vern is very well known in Vermont agriculture. How does it feel to fill those shoes?
Well, I can't fill Vern's shoes. I don't think that's even possible. I have to bring kind of my own approach. I am actually trained as an anthropologist who has been working in public health and has moved into agriculture because I really see the link. I mean, there's a link between what we eat, how we get our food, and our health. And one of the things I've noticed many places I've lived is how food is often not accessible or available or affordable. And I think that these are things that kind of provide a cross-section between many different fields.
Can you tell me a little bit more about, you were speaking about the way anthropology kind of interconnects, and I think that's really interesting, especially in Vermont.
The thing is that when you think, who does agriculture? People do agriculture, right? People actually, right now, soon we may have robots doing agriculture, but right now people do agriculture. And understanding the people who do agriculture and understanding the consumers as well, I think is very important, and that's a unique perspective that I could bring in. Now I can't compare myself to Vern. He's a great guy. He's been very supportive in my adjustment. And I'm not trying to fill his shoes. I'm trying to continue where his shoes were with a new pair of shoes.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way of looking at it. And you lived for 8 years on St. Eustatius, an island.
St. Eustatius.
Oh, that's it. Thank you.
Yes.
An island in the Caribbean. How do you think that time there kind of...
I lived there for 8 years, and it's the Dutch Caribbean. You know, there are different parts of the Caribbean that are associated with different colonial histories. So the Dutch Caribbean is kind of unique. And one of the things I noticed is, again, food. Everything is imported, and the price of food was so expensive. And unlike other parts of the Caribbean, which is why I mentioned it, like the British Caribbean or the French islands, the link to agriculture has been severed. So everything is imported. So when I was there, I started working. You know, when you're in the Caribbean, if you have some type of expertise, you're put into everything. So I started working. I was actually the interim director of agriculture, livestock, and fisheries, and we were trying to kind of reinvigorate agriculture and have people grow local. And as we did that, we saw how many people wanted that. So, and it's interesting because it was a small island. And when I was down there, I was probably kind of not making any sense, but I was saying, oh, this is just how it is on this island. When I came back to the United States and I saw the same things, but it's so easier to see now because I had seen it in a small environment where you can really see these things. But people still have the same problems here, and as we can see, the price of food just keeps going up. And I remember hearing somebody from the USDA say, every time you eat or put on clothes, think agriculture. So that's how important agriculture is in our lives, and I would say that living on a small island context really made me hone into that and bring that experience back to the United States.
Yeah, I'm sure seeing it in kind of a smaller environment is easy to extrapolate.
Yes, and you say, well, this is here, it's dysfunctional, and then when you come back and you're like, wow, it's the same thing. But you can see it a lot clearer. So that time that I had on that small island was really enlightening to me.
And as the director, what are your priorities and how do you plan to accomplish them?
Well, I think one of the things that we're working on is just trying to make SARE a more inclusive organization so that we can reach out to different types of farmers across the region. I think that is very important. That's a huge region, and each state has different locales that are different. How do we reach the people so that they know that SARE is out there, so that they know they can apply for SARE grants to improve their farm or agricultural business?
And you were talking about those grants and like what a large region it is. How closely do you work in each community? Is it state by state? We spoke a little bit before this. We're talking from Maine to West Virginia.
Well, SARE has state coordinators in each state, and they do outreach. But one of the things that we're trying to do is work with the state coordinators and kind of bring in community members to kind of identify who's there and who to reach out to and how best to reach out, which may include actually going to farms. And agriculture is changing, I think. A lot of times we think about agriculture as primarily rural, but now you have urban agriculture. People are in what I found in the last place I lived is that you have a lot of things called food deserts or food areas that are food insecure, and instead of people just asking, we want a grocery store, people are growing their own food, and it's really an amazing thing to see. So that's one of the things that I think I'm going to learn a lot in this position, I think, and I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to Vermont. Vermont is beautiful, but I have to remember that this is regional. So, and I really want to meet farmers and well, maybe not makes to have a lot of things to do, but utilize the resources that SARE has to really get out there and talk to farmers so you hear what their problems are or challenges are. I don't like the word problems, I like challenges, because challenges can be faced. And really push the organization forward so that everybody has access and knows about SARE funding, because SARE provides education as well. So it's not just about getting money, but perhaps there's some information that a farmer might need that SARE could provide.
And off the top of your head, what kind of dollar amount are you looking at, like a ballpark?
Well, I mean, SARE gets funding from the USDA. About maybe $8 million goes to grants, and there are 6 different grant programs of different sizes. So it really depends on what the recipient wants to do. And we have a great staff, an excellent staff, excellent program grant administrators. And if people are interested in SARE grants, they could always get in touch with one of those grant administrators and apply. And we're even introducing programs to have people get technical assistance to help them write a grant, apply for grants, because that is sometimes a barrier to people even applying.
Is that what you were talking about when you mentioned education earlier?
Well, that's part of it, yeah, the education piece. But there's also education on different aspects of agriculture. For example, cover crops. They can go to the website and there's a lot of information. And SARE is broken up into different regions, and we are the Northeast region. It's really an interesting program that they came up with years ago, because we get federal dollars, but because each program is local, it can address the regional issues in the areas that people are working with. And it's also set up where there's an administrative council which actually has farmers and has the representatives of those. That's my boss, really. It's kind of like a board. So to a certain extent, it's a really bottom-up organization that's driven by the people that are looking for who are seeking out the funds. So it's really a fascinating, or the way it was set up, it was really, to me, ahead of its time when I continued to read the legislation, which isn't very interesting reading, but it's necessary reading.
And we spoke a little bit before this taping started about your work with SARE beforehand, specifically around diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice.
Yes.
Do you mind speaking on that?
Well, let me just take one time, I will, but
oh, absolutely.
Years ago, when I first got back, because I lived in St. Eustatius for 8 years, I came back about 4 or 5 years ago. COVID was in there, so it's kind of fuzzy when I actually came back. And I was doing some research on black farming practices, and I ran across this document, and it was published by SARE. I think it was probably, I don't know if it was national or southern, so that was my first introduction to SARE. But then I was contacted by SARE to do some work with their diversity, equity, and inclusion and justice. And we were redesigning some of the grant programs. And again, this is to make sure that grants are going out to individuals who have not been granted before. And it was in these, and I served on the grant redesign working group, an ad hoc committee, and The effect of that was to actually come up with a new grant program, a BIPOC grant program, BIPOC and tribal communities grant program, which is going to be introduced, and as well as this technical assistance to make sure that people have the ability to apply for grants. You have to understand that some people are better at writing grants than others. They have access to people who can write grants for them, and other people don't have them. So we want to kind of eliminate that barrier. So that's what brought me into SARE, and then the position became available, and I applied for it. And one of the primary reasons I applied for it is I really think the work that SARE is doing is important, but also the excellent staff that the organization has. So if somebody's interested, they should contact Northeast SARE and find out which grant is appropriate for them.
Absolutely. The team you're working on means everything sometimes.
It's everything, yes.
Can you tell me a little about what sustainable agriculture means to you?
It means everything. I think that, when we think about sustainable, it's something that we want to carry on for our children, for our grandchildren. And sustainable agriculture really makes sure that we are the stewards of the land, of the environment, of everything. And sometimes, for me, sustainable agriculture is my environmentalism. And I think that if people talked about the environment and environmentalism in terms of sustainable agriculture, you'd have more people agreeing on points, because everybody, as I said, agriculture, every time you wake up in the morning and have to eat and put on clothes, you're talking about agriculture. So it kind of connects people. So for me, sustainable agriculture is my approach to improving the environment and creating an environment that's there so that people can continue to flourish. Not just people, plants, animals, everything. We all are dependent on it. And I think that sustainable agriculture is the way to move forward.
All right, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure.
And if a farmer or a researcher has a project, before you go your way, how can they reach out to you?
Well, you can reach out to me, which is teresa.leslie@uvm.edu. And what I will do, or you can reach out to Northeast SARE. You can go to the website, Northeast SARE, northeast.sare.org, and there's an email there, which I don't want to give the wrong email, where you could reach out and you will be directed to the right person.
Absolutely. Thank you again for joining us. And that wraps up our program for today. From the crew behind the scenes here at WCAX, I'm Jolie Whitney. Have a good one.